Right, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for your purchase of this breathing webinar here on FICS, World Sports Chiropractic Federation website portal, what you want to call it. So today, our gospel of the day is breathing. So we're talking about all sorts of things about breathing. It's nothing I have invented, by the way. So this is not anything groundbreaking or new per se, but it's a very good reminder of basic breathing physiology, some neurology, endocrinology, all these kind of things, but loads of mechanics, loads of things that are very relevant to athletic performance and stuff you can take home and start applying in clinic as soon as you get back in a clinic. So there's lots of stuff here, and without any further delay, let's crack on. So we'll get this screen shared and we are good to go. Fantastic. So the breath of life is the breath of sport, because at the end of the day, if you run out of breath, you ain't going nowhere, not very fast anyways. So obviously we all know the basic facts about breathing as such. What's going on? Why is this thing really taking a long time? Oh, here we are. Yes, why? So why do we breathe? Now, breathing in itself, of course, should we call it a very vital bodily function? It's something that we don't live very long or live very well if we don't get to breathe. And it's been known all the way since ancient times that the breath, spirit, is the same word in a lot of languages. Fun enough, in Finnish as well. Finland, that's where I'm from, so hence I may make the odd reference to Finnish, but equally in Sanskrit, in other ancient languages, the words have been synonymous over the years. Now, equally, when you're looking at the ancient movement arts, Tai Chi, yoga, martial arts, it's not a coincidence that the first thing they teach you is how to breathe. And they really emphasize the importance of one's breath. And of course, same thing goes with playing musical instruments. You need to learn to breathe. You need to be in tune with your breath. Otherwise, you can't really express yourself in music. And of course, breathing, it has an influence on just about everything else. So it will have an effect on your hormones. It will have an effect on your muscle tension, for example, your performance, as well as your mood, fun enough. So yes, as stated before, without breath, there is no life. So why is breathing so important? Oh, no, let's just move this slightly out of the way. There you go. So why is breathing so important? It's because, of course, it's a gas exchange. So that's where we get rid of CO2 and we replace that with oxygen. So that can be then moved along through the blood system, through the circulatory system to all different parts of our body, all the different cells that are desperately clamoring for oxygen. And of course, even more important when we're exercising, when we're doing sport, because like we all know, that tends to increase the heart rate, that tends to increase the demand for oxygen in the tissues. So very important. Now, of course, the pipeline, if you like, starts here in the nose, or alternatively in the mouth, works its way down the trachea into the bronchi, bronchioles, and finally to the alveoli, which of course are the little sort of sacs filled with gas, that have lots and lots of little capillaries around the walls, and that's where the gas exchange finally then takes place. And that is very, very, very important. Of course, in the modern day and age now, with the whole coronavirus being in the headlines and in the news, and very much the hot potato topic, we all need to be very mindful of our lungs and breathing apparatus. Now, according to Wikipedia, normal breathing rate is somewhere between 14 and 22 breaths per minute, not beats per minute, breaths per minute indeed. And do you know what? That is pretty high rate of breathing. It is something, it's more akin to a sports-related breath. According to Wikipedia, that is the normal average resting breath rate. But we'll discuss that a little bit more detail later. So when it comes to sport, of course, so we've got to remember that when your heart rate increases, you require more oxygen in the muscles. So the muscles become starved of oxygen. That's when all the lactate, all the lactic acid, all the disgusting, horrible metabolites in your muscles, they will accumulate if you can't clear it all out, and then you stop. You get cramp, you get fatigue, you know, your form goes out of the window, you start picking up injuries, and that's basically because you can't ventilate properly. Like I said earlier, you know, if the person breathes, say, even 12 times a minute, that's about 5 liters of air. At top intensity, that may climb all the way to 45 breaths per minute, which is quite a few more liters of air. Now, as it goes, you know, this whole breathing mechanism and the breathing, well, just how we breathe, actually is relatively badly understood. And it hasn't really had lots of emphasis placed on it over the years. And hence, there's a lot of room for tinkering. Especially maybe not really so much with your elite, top elite sportsmen and athletes, but definitely your Sunday hackers, you know, all these recreational athletes, they can gain massive improvement in their performance just by breathing better. So the race times, you know, those come about because you have better performance in the race, and because you've been able to train better. Obviously, the improved recovery rates and reduced risk of injury and illness, those play a part as well. Because the less time you spend injured and ill, and less time you have to spend recovering, the more time you can dedicate into your hard training sessions. So hence, the hypothesis is very logically that more time training, the better your performance. Simple as that, really. And I don't think we need an RCT to prove that, in all honesty. But yes, before we get into the nitty-gritty, take a nice deep breath. Take a deep breath. And relax. There you go. Now, that feels better already, I'm sure. So anyways, most of you, I believe, lifted your chest and shoulders. So you did something like that. A lot of you opened your mouth. I would say about 90% of you probably opened your mouth, both to inhale and to exhale. But most people do that. If you do a little thing in clinic, as part of your new patient assessment, or even not necessarily a new patient, but any patient who comes in, just ask them to take a deep breath. Whatever is their default deep breath, don't prime this in any way. But most people will do this. I don't know exactly why, but I know why they shouldn't be doing it. So hold on tight and let's crack on. So when we breathe into the upper chest, it's inefficient. Yeah, you only lose very little of your lungs. You don't use a big bottom of the lungs. You know, essentially also you waste a lot of muscular effort, and we don't like wasting effort. Especially when it comes to sport, even more so endurance sport, you want to be running as smoothly and efficiently as possible. Now, so what are the excuses? What do people say? Oh, they say that nobody ever told them that. Nobody ever taught them how to breathe. Okay, well, that's about to change now. Been doing that since I was little. Somebody actually told me, and I was, yeah, fair enough. It's the same as with languages. You know, you speak your native tongue from when you're little, and you take to it like a fish to water. But actually, learning new languages can be a real good thing, and really, same goes with the breathing. Learning to breathe in a different way can be extremely fulfilling as well. And yeah, there are abundant examples in the world of people who just do it wrong, and hence we copy them. Parents, family, uncles, aunties, whatever, even top sportsmen. But most importantly, nobody's ever thought about it. And us as sports chiropractors, it is our job to think about it. It is our job to, you know, to bend our minds to these little nitty-gritty details that a lot of people seem to forget, and it's our job to alert them to it. Especially if you have a patient or an athlete comes to see you in clinic who is determined to do well, so they will take to this like ducks to water, as it goes. So I got interested in breathing a few years ago. It was this guy actually on the screen right now, Tony Martin. He's a German time trial cycling ace from a couple of years ago. And this was, must have been watching Tour de France time trial stage. And I was just watching all these guys whizzing along on their fancy bikes and absolutely burying themselves, turning themselves inside out. And there was Tony Martin. And I thought, you know what, Tony, you got fat. You know, you can just see on the screen there, you know, that his belly is sticking out a bit. And as I was watching the other guys, I thought, you know what, nobody else is doing this. So what's going on? Obviously, you can see also that Tony's, you might see the little sticker on his nose there, but you also see his mouth is gaping open to maximize the amount of air he's able to take in. But what he was doing differently was the fact that he was breathing into his belly when he was in this time trial tuck. And none of the others were doing that. Were they too vain? I don't know. Didn't want to look fat in the photos, but Tony didn't give two monkeys and he ended up winning the stage, of course. So the thing is, you know, sometimes you got to do things a bit differently from the pack to get better results or just different results. You can't just subscribe to the dogma and existing precedent, but instead you got to look at it from outside the box and apply it to yourself. Going back into cycling a little bit, there's a chap called Graham O'Brien, a British fella who was very good on the track. And he came up with a very inventive, ingenious way of or a bike position, which just allowed him to be super aerodynamic compared to everybody else. And hence he took the hour record and all sorts. And then UCI decided, of course, to ban his controversial riding position because it gave him too much of an advantage. But there we are. So yeah, I got interested in breathing, and you know what? It has been a very fruitful thing for me to do because I quite like endurance sport myself, be it running, cycling, Ironman, triathlon, all these kind of different things. So now you might find it surprising, but there are more than one way to breathe. Most people, like we discussed earlier, they breathe up here in the top of the chest, of course, because the lungs are tiny at the top. Hence, you get a lesser lung volume used with that, and your respiratory rate is going to be higher. Then you have the sort of yoga breath, you know, the diaphragmatic breath, which goes all the way into your belly. So you take a big, big full breath, which of course then slows down your respiratory rate, but also it just enhances the amount of air that can be actually circulated but with one breath. Now, then you have the sort of hybrid between the two, which is the COSTAL breath. So that utilizes the lower part of your rib cage. I'll just show you here. So right along here. So as you breathe in, so the lower ribs flare and come back in, which is very important because it allows kind of best of both worlds, really. And we'll get to all those fantastic things in a minute. Of course, you have all sorts of other bits and bobs, the yoga breathing pranayama, where there are ways of using different nostrils and back and forth, all this kind of stuff. Circular breathing, again, which is very important when it comes to playing certain instruments, for example, and numerous others like Wim Hof, which we'll discuss a little bit later as well. And of course, they all claim that they're the best thing since sliced bread, which we would do, absolutely. Now, so what most people do is they use the top part, which is fine. It will get you kind of there. It allows you to exist. It allows you to remain breathing. It allows you to keep doing your day-to-day things. All the movement there is restricted here to these muscles at the top, upper ribs and shoulders. So you use your traps, levator, scap, scalenes, SEM, sometimes even depending on the violence of the breath, you know, you can use your pecs, you know, subclavius, goodness me, all these kind of different bits. And you know what, the problem with that is that these muscles are not very well suited for breathing. They're good at short burst activities, throwing spears at antelopes, you know, maybe swimming, climbing, wrestling, all these kind of things. Fantastic for that, but they don't do well with long sustained activities. Wrong muscle fiber type, really. That's where it goes. That's what happens. And oftentimes, yeah, when people breathe up here, they stop breathing through the mouth. So they just almost like without even thinking about it. Well, obviously, of course, they don't think about it. If they did, they wouldn't do it. But so what they do is they open the mouth to breathe. And it's kind of combination of those two, but that tends to lead to the postural, functional, biomechanical imbalances, one of which is the anterior head carriage, where the head just juts forward and in a bit of an subconscious attempt to open up the airway that little bit more, perhaps. So then the diaphragmatic breath, obviously, as I just slightly said before, so it's a full belly breath, so it tends to be very slow, tends to be very much more used for relaxation purposes. So towards the end of the yoga class, for example, that's oftentimes when the teachers say, right, I want you to do full diaphragmatic breathing into the belly. And everybody's very happy that the torture of the yoga class is now over and they can have their 10 minutes of lying down, which is lovely. So basically from there, yeah, so the belly bulges in and out with the inhalation. Of course, belly goes back down with the exhalation. Main benefits are enhanced ventilation and perfusion, so you can get a bigger breath, which is fine. And mainly uses diaphragm, which of course is the muscle, the dome-shaped muscle underneath your rib cage that then does up and down movement like that. And it tends to lower your heart rate as well, which is lovely. So costal breath, the middle breath that we used earlier. So I kind of like to call it the athletic endurance breath, purely because it makes you go further. It makes you more efficient. Like I said earlier, you know, it utilizes the best of both worlds. So you can use the rib cage whilst at the same time relaxing your shoulders and relaxing your neck. So you're not taxing all these different muscles here that are better left, I suppose, untaxed. You can leave your core muscle switched on, which is a massive bonus over the diaphragmatic full yoga breath, if you like. Because when you take full belly breath, you have to be extremely competent to be able to still engage your core muscles. So with this costal breath, you don't actually let go of your lower abs and your pelvic floor, etc., etc. So all those muscles are still switched on, which then helps you with power transfer, movement efficiency, all of that. And also helps, most likely, I can't verify this by science, but you know, the hypothesis is that it also helps protect against injury, which is very good. Yeah, and volumes can again be quite high, and also it seems to lower the heart rate quite a bit because of the hormonal connotations. I'm building a bit of a case towards this costal breath, aren't I? So hormonally, so what happens is that when people breathe up here, it's a stress breath, simple as that. So the stress hormones are adrenaline, cortisol. Everybody knows about adrenaline, cortisol. They make your muscles tense up. They make you ready to run or fight, or you know, they make you switch off your digestion because you're about to go and run or fight. You know, they dilate your pupils. All of this fight or flight response. Very important. And it's, you know, there's a time and place for it, right? Now, the diaphragmatic breath utilizes mainly endorphins and oxytocin, which are the happy, chill out, healing, recovery hormones. That allow your muscles to relax, allow your guts to start normal function again, and they really enhance your sleep quality, you know, lull you into a lovely, lovely, safe thing. And again, of course, there's a major application for that. And with the costal breath, now I can't verify this. I haven't got scientific data on it. I don't know what the percentage might be, but I'm assuming that there's a mixture of both. There's probably a bit of adrenaline, cortisol. There's probably a bit of endorphins and oxytocin, but the mixture tends to be a bit less heady. So in that sense, you know, from my personal experience, I can vouch that when I'm in control of my breath, for example, when running or cycling, it feels so much more relaxing to just keep clicking on at a steady pace. Practically. So what's the practicalities of this thing then? So normal breath, upper chest, stress, good for sprinting, good for getting the athletes pumped up, you know, getting you ready for that, getting you ready for that final sprint, you know, getting you ready for whether it's martial arts bout or whatever it may be. But that's what these that's what the upper chest breath is mainly good for. So diaphragmatic breath, again, more chill out. I probably personally would only use diaphragmatic breath when I'm actually done exercising. So I'm relaxing, I'm recovering, you know, taking it easy. I can do it when I'm walking, which is nice, but I would not do that when running. Just wouldn't. Maybe I'm just not good enough at it. The COSTAL breath, like I said, you know, and what I've been building the case is an endurance breath. It's mainly aerobic, so not anaerobic, but it really allows your engine to keep ticking over and feeding that oxygen into the muscles, into the system, so it keeps working nice and efficiently. Now, here's a big question. So is it nose or mouth? Which one is better? I suppose, you know what, there's really only one contender here, in all honesty. I mean, nose, it's got one job, or maybe two. But breathing is number one. Of course, smelling is another. But, you know, if you take away the one job that a nose has, it's just going to be reduced to holding up your specs. You know, that's the only thing. And it would be a shame really to do that, because nasal breath actually improves the oxygen uptake. So in the system itself, not necessarily the amount of oxygen going back and forth, but it actually improves how the oxygen is utilized in your body. The other massive advantage of this is the inbuilt AC system. For me, coming from a colder climate in Finland, obviously it's very important that the air is not completely frozen when it enters the system, because that feels really nasty. That's what makes you cough and splutter when you go out for the first time from warm house into the freezing temperature outdoors. It takes a second for the nose to catch up with it, but it warms and humidifies the air so that it's appropriate and doesn't destroy your lungs, which would be unpleasant, I understand. The other thing is, of course, that is very helpful is the nasal passages help remove muck out of the air. And of course, nose hairs, even if a lot of people get them removed, they have their purpose and function in that as well. Now, the other thing about mouth breathing, why mouth breathing may not be the best option, is that it causes dehydration and acidifies the mouth. And yeah, indeed. And of course, when we talk a lot, when we do all of this, we always mouth breathe anyways. So that's why we all need a sip of water from time to time. The other thing about mouth breathing, it messes up with your recovery because you can't sleep, not well anyways. You get snoring, sleep apnea, you get elbowed in the ribs by the partner because you're snoring like a loony. The other things are mechanically anterior head carriage, which puts a lot of strain on the CT and can have then further problems elsewhere. Even building up to suboccipital tension that produces headaches and all sorts of nastiness, which we really don't want. And the reduced respiratory strength. So, you know, if the pipe is always big, you don't have to worry about it too much, which actually then backfires again a bit later on. So, what's wrong with the girl on the left? You can all spot the basic things, isn't it? You can see that there's a little bit of a pelvic problem, bit of a back problem, bit of a shoulder, neck, CT problem. Chest is all collapsed, head is held forward. She looks grumpy as well on the left. You know, goodness me, I probably would be quite grumpy if I was standing like that. But if we look at it from an athletic perspective, now which one is more likely to get injured? Because again, chiropractors are great, you know, sports chiropractors, we understand form, we understand mechanics, we understand how various different body parts integrate to each other and work together efficiently and to minimize risk of injury. So of course, when somebody is standing up beautifully like the girl on the right there, they are less likely to get injured, just because it implies that they have a better control of their system and they're mechanically more able. Now, so in that sense, I mean, I can't say that all of these things are caused directly by the breathing, you know, all the postural faults and things with the girl on the left. But if you improve the breath and you add a little bit of education on posture and that, chances are, you know, you can make a significant difference in this athlete's career as well, which is great. And like I said, you know, it's very easily done. So coming back to nose or mouth breath, one more thing that is very important. So this is nitric oxide, NO for short. So if anybody here is a fan of the car films, Fast and the Furious car films. So there's always that thing, you know, the hero is racing the baddie, and then all of a sudden they go to the nitrous bottle on the side, you know, open up the valve and press the button, and the car just goes. This is kind of the same stuff, and it's produced in your body internally. It's all legal as well. So there is no, this is not something that will get you in trouble with doping authorities or anything like that. But the point is with nitric oxide is that as you breathe through the nose, it's secreted in the nasal passages all the way. So as you breathe in and out, nitric oxide floods the system. It's a smooth muscle relaxant. Now, obviously, we all know that smooth muscle, there's loads of that in your breathing apparatus, your heart, you know, your blood vessels. Okay, heart is heart muscle. It's slightly different, but, you know, kind of still applies with the same mechanism as the smooth muscle. And also guts have smooth muscle in their lining. So what happens is that, you know, as you get nitric oxide, it enhances the diameter of the pipe. So all of a sudden you have bigger pipes, which means there's less resistance to fluid or gas moving in and out, which is really good. Again, efficiency goes up, and that means that the performance goes up. So that's very good. Less resistance, easier flow, greater efficiency. Simple as that, right? Now, back in the day, I don't know if any one of you has had grandparents, for example, with heart conditions. They always used to be given the nitrous pumps, so they would get a bit of a gripping pain in the chest, you know, with angina or whatever it may be. Little puff of the nitrous, and all of a sudden they felt better again. So this is more or less the same stuff again. So I suppose the question is, did those grandparents actually need the pump, or would they have been fine if they just learned to breathe properly? We'll never know. Now, if you are interested enough and you want to try nasal breathing, so you want to stop breathing through the mouth, especially when doing sport, it can be a humbling experience, shall we call it. It's something that it will knock you for six, and it will make you gobble up pretty much the whole of the humble pie, because your performance will be dreadful. I can promise you that. So when I first tried it, I thought, okay, I better do this in a pretty safe environment rather than on the road. So I was doing a lot of turbo trainer sessions at the time. So if somebody doesn't know what a turbo trainer is, it's an indoor bike trainer. You pop your bike onto it and you can just pedal away and listen to music and whatnot. And I suppose not to be accosted by the other road users. Won't name and shame here. But so yeah, anyway, so there I was, put my bike on and get everything set up, and put my tunes on, and started pedaling, doing my warm up. And I thought, right, here we go, you know, nose breath only, don't open the mouth. And it only took a minute, and I was desperate to open my mouth. And that's when I really realized that actually, you know what, I've been mouth breathing pretty much my whole life. I was able to be relatively fit, but I wasn't really healthy. I wasn't really performing to my best possible extent either. So I wasn't reaching my potential. So fast forward a little bit, I plowed on. I just kept on at it. I actually went as far as putting a strip of tape on my lips, just a little bit of kinesio tape, just to kind of keep my lips sealed. And it made it easier to transition. But you know, the first couple of weeks was horrible. I really felt like suffocating. I had to constantly ease off the pedals and trying to keep myself under control, so I wouldn't black out or anything. But as weeks rolled by, I was able to utilize higher and higher heart rates, which is fine. And towards the end of it, well, now I can do full high intensity interval sessions with nasal breath only. My heart rate tends to climb to about 185 during those sessions, and I probably sound like a raging bull when doing it, but it's all nasal breath only, so I don't need to open my mouth anymore, which is actually quite nice. and in a way a bit surreal, considering how far I've come from where I was. So efficiency. Efficiency is very important because, especially when it comes to endurance sport, you don't want to be wasting any energy. That's the thing. Say you're running an ultra marathon, or cycling a long distance, or swimming a long distance. You know, it's one of those things. You utilize and burn as little fuel as you can to maintain a certain speed, which is very important. So if you're able to reduce your energy expenditure by 5 to 10%, oh my goodness, that makes a massive difference. So there are a couple of different ways to look at it. Either is looking at either a lower heart rate at a steady pace, so you just go the distance better, or you can maintain a higher pace, higher heart rate, and hence gain a better finishing time. It's one or the other. Also, the other big thing here to consider is that acidity that we all associate with high intensity efforts, you know, is the burn, it's the lactic burn, isn't it? So we all know that. If you ever done an interval session where you go, a Tabata session, for example, where you go 20 seconds all out, rest for 20, and keep doing that number of times. My goodness, if your whole body is not in flames by the end of it, you haven't done it properly. But if you drop down in intensity a little tiny bit, you're still sort of able to cognitively control your breath. The acidity comes on a lot later, and also recover a lot quicker from that effort, or that session even, which is really good. Now, CO2 has had a bit of a bad rap in the world for a long time. Now, people say it's a waste gas. It kind of is, kind of isn't really. It's not that black and white. But the reason why I was feeling dreadful when I first got on the bike and tried nose breathing only was because I just couldn't clear out the CO2. So that meant that my CO2 levels in the body spiked, and I was feeling really quite horrible. Now, the other thing is that you actually need the CO2. So you need it to release the oxygen from the hemoglobin. So of course we all remember back, let's go back to a little basic physiology thing. So the oxygen, of course, once it enters the bloodstream, it doesn't just kind of chill out on its own, but it hitches a ride on the hemoglobin, on the red blood cells. And hemoglobin, depending, it can either hold on to the oxygen very tightly, doesn't want to let it go, or it'll be like, hey, you know, dude, go and do your thing. That's cool. Now, if you don't have enough CO2, if you just keep blowing it out of your mouth and you drop your CO2 levels, that means hemoglobin becomes rather clingy. And that means your oxygen doesn't get released. That means you drop your energy levels, and there's poor efficiency, all of that kind of thing happens. So there's the Bohr effect, which means when you have high CO2 in the system, you have low pH, and that means your body oxygenates better because the oxygen actually gets released beautifully from the hemoglobin. And that is what you want. So you want to keep the CO2 levels a little bit higher than what conventionally has been believed. And it really is the CO2 that actually triggers the need to breathe. So it's not nothing to do with the oxygen concentration per se. It's actually the relative carbon dioxide concentration in the body. So I briefly mentioned earlier Wim Hof, and Wim Hof has been getting popular recently. I mean, I like Wim Hof. You know, I've been with him for a long time. He's a Dutch fella, for those who don't know, and he's a very straight-spoken guy. He says it how it is. He's actually an amazing individual. You know, he like there you can see him doing his lotus in the snow in the mountains, and he has numerous world records for being able to tolerate the heat, the cold, holding his breath and all this kind of stuff, swimming underwater in nothing but pair of speedos, all this kind of stuff. So he's come up with this Wim Hof breathing method, which is basically intermittent hypocapnic training. So that means that you take big breaths through the mouth. So you reduce your oxygen, you reduce your CO2, and then you hold your breath. And that's what it is. So it's lots of breath holding, which is fine. So according to Wim Hof, it causes respiratory alkalosis, it changes body chemistry, and it actually, what it does really is that it increases the hemoglobin affinity to oxygen. So on the downside is that it reduces tissue perfusion and causes vasoconstriction. Now, for athletic applications, the Wim Hof method may not be the best unless you're a free diver, which is a different story. But we're not going to deal with free divers here. So the main application, as far as I can see, for Wim Hof method is autoimmune conditions and all these kind of different weird and wonderful things that medicine nowadays is not either able to treat well or doesn't quite understand yet. But Wim Hof method seems to have near on miraculous effects on some of these things. So, okay, I'm not saying that Wim Hof method is the cure for autoimmune disease. No, that's not what I'm saying, but it's something that you might look into it. And it's quite interesting. So then we have, on the slightly other hand, we've got high altitude training or high altitude effect training, which is intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training. So as Wim Hof was hypocapnic, that means low CO2. So now we're talking about hypercapnic, which is the increased carbon dioxide training. Now, when you go up a mountain, of course, the thinner air, it causes increase in the EPO hormone. So you get more red blood cells and hemoglobin, which increases the oxygen carrying capacity. And that's great. Now, unfortunately, some people back in the day used to do doping. So they would do blood doping and inject EPO and all this kind of stuff that, of course, they got done for quite rightly, the dirty, cheating scumbags they were. But the point is, you can actually get a very good effect completely legally just by, if you know what to do when you're breathing. So, like I said a little bit earlier, it tends to delay the acidity and fatigue when you do breathing through the nose, and it tends to improve your anaerobic threshold and anaerobic glycolysis, which are two, of course, very good things when it comes to the top end performance. Now, the other thing is, of course, it increases the respiratory muscle strength and breathing efficiency, which is good. So you don't actually need a mask. You don't need those, they do the high altitude masks and all those newfangled things. They don't actually work. So you are really wasting your money if you're going for those. And chances are, if you wear those masks all the time, it can actually cause chronic hypoxia, which then is linked again to neurodegeneration, all these kind of nasty things that happen later on. So the high altitude training, the main difference to Wim Hof is that this is hypercapnic. Wim Hof method is mainly hypocapnic. So for the athletic patient, the hypercapnic high altitude training effect is probably a better choice. And there's Wim Hof for those who are indeed sick and need a miracle. Now, coming back to the high altitude stuff a little bit more. So you can, of course, do hypoxic training. So breathing less, just breathe less often. Hold your breath for a time. Now, of course, swimming underwater, so all the swimmers used to know how to do hypoxic training, hypoxic sets, swimming lengths in the pool underwater, just holding your breath. And then, that would have a certain effect on the system, of course. Obviously, the chap in the picture is David Blaine, a well-known magician who did a very long stint in a tank. I mean, if you look at how crinkly his hands are, goodness me. I can't remember how long he was in the tank for, but it was quite a long time. So the easiest way of getting the high altitude effect is actually just holding your breath on empty lungs during exercise. So out, then at some point you decide, actually, I'm just not going to breathe in now. So you just pause. You pause your breath on empty lungs. So whether you're walking, you hold your breath then 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever strides, as long as you feel comfortable, and then continue breathing through your nose. Same happens with you if you're cycling, certain number of pedal strokes or seconds, whatever you want to do. And then you again resume breathing normally through the nose. So you don't want to ruin it by then taking a big mouth gulp, because that kind of ruins the whole effect. So what that does, increase your lactate tolerance, increase your CO2 tolerance. And the burn will affect you less, which is nice. So that means hopefully your training performance will get higher, and hence you can push harder in your races. So here's the high altitude camp for poor athletes. So those who are not on national teams and squads, or who have a slightly limited budget when it comes to training and that, or even time-wise, can't really find the time to go and hit the mountains for a few weeks at a time. You can do all of this at sea level at home without any equipment, which is fine. So start off walking, running, cycling. Turbo trainer for me was any kind of safe environment where you're not going to do yourself damage or drown or anything like that if you do feel a bit funny. So you breathe through the nose only. Remember, that's the nose's job. That's the one job it has. So don't deprive it from its only job. And you can tape the lips. That can be quite helpful. Just to kind of keep reminding you. I mean, come on, the worst thing that will happen if you really, really feel horrible, whip off the tape, and that's fine. Exhale fully through the nose, just let it go and pause. And you just hold it for a certain amount of time, certain number of pedal strokes or strides, and then continue again normally. So once you start breathing normally through the nose, you stimulate that nitric oxide release. So remember nitric oxide from earlier, which is the nitrous, you know, in the sports cars, they make them go super duper fast. It's kind of the same application here. And it can be applied to pretty much every type of training. If you're interested in more like yoga stuff, you know, if you want to do CrossFit or all these other things, yeah, you can, I'm sure you can still find a way of applying it there. And just a little word of warning, yes, it will feel peculiar. It will feel strange. So you'll find out. But let me also assure you, it's entirely safe. Nothing bad will happen to you when you do this. And if you feel weird, you just continue breathing normally. Simple as that. Now, when it comes to recovery, which of course, an old triathlon coach of mine used to say that the recovery is the fourth discipline in triathlon. And, you know, he's right. He's absolutely right. And that's something that, especially recreational athletes, they don't know that very well. Your pro athletes, of course, because they get paid to do sport, that's their job. For them, recovery is very important, and they're completely happy with that. But then you have your builders and policemen and whatnot who like to do sport, but they just still have to work and they have to look after the kids and all that. So if you can help them recover a little bit, they'll be eternally and in your debt. So the most important thing is to stop mouth breathing. So full nasal breath, diaphragmatic breath when recovering during exercise. If they can use a COSTAL breath, that's even better. But at recovery, use the diaphragmatic breath right into the belly. So nice and slow. Of course, better breath during training will again reduce then the recovery burden, should we call it. Now, one interesting thing is that the diaphragmatic breath apparently can reduce the free radical buildup in the body and therefore reduce oxidative stress. So again, that's something that is very important. A lot of athletes are on a cocktail of supplements, antioxidants, and this and that and the other. And it's very important that your breath actually can help with that. So the other thing is that some people may find it a bit strange, but if you tape your lips at night, so you're supposed to be sleeping somewhere between 8 and 9 hours. I suppose if you're training, if you're an athlete, probably 8 hours a night is very important now. So that's a third of your day a third of every 24-hour period. So if you can maximize your recovery during that time by essentially sleeping better, better sleep quality, more deep sleep, then, take it. Tape the lips at night. It'll stop you snoring. It'll stop you rolling around too much, because you actually become a lot more comfortable. And also it helps because your partner won't be elbowing you in the ribs all the time to stop you snoring, which will be lovely. Hopefully help with the marriage as well. The breath is a massive detoxer. So hence, if you're breathing well, somebody said that about 70% of detoxification in the body occurs in the breath. So we're breathing out a lot of the muck and gunk that actually enters your system. And that's a very powerful number, 70%. So for digestive system, like I mentioned earlier, utilizing a good belly breath, diaphragmatic breath, it actually mechanically massages the guts. So hence the guts will just move that little bit more easy. Now, a lot of people these days, they suffer with digestive problems, gut issues. It's very rife. In clinic, I see just about every other person, every third person will say they have IBS. They have, some even have chronic gut problems like Crohn's or UC or all this kind of stuff. And getting that little bit of motility going just by breathing better can be very helpful. The nitric oxide, again, it can help reduce the resistance in the guts, and hence stuff moves that a little bit easier. So hopefully they don't have to eat massive tons and truckloads of fiber to keep their guts going, but a little bit of breathing, conscious breathing can again help with that as well. And that'd be very well received by most of those patients. So the asthma sufferers, yeah, big elephant in the room. Now, everybody who has been following sport over the years knows that every athlete has asthma, right? Or so they claim. They're all on their puffers, before races. And as long as you've got a TUE for it, yeah, you're golden, right? As long as you can justify it, you're fine. But are those actually necessary? That's the question, isn't it? So if these guys and girls, if they will taught to breathe better, would they still need them? Or, depends on your morals and ethics, but if you still insist on using them, would you gain an even better performance advantage? That I don't know. And that's not for me to explore either, but something for you to perhaps think amongst yourselves. Now, here's a big thing. This is something, again, you can utilize in clinic as soon as you go back. But how to spot an overbreather? So most of us overbreathe massively. So those people, they'll walk from the reception room to your clinic room, and they're out of breath. They will sit there and go, they try and catch their breath. They breathe through the mouth, and it's almost like a gasping. Then they could be young and fit and healthy looking, and they can still be doing this. Well, you just got to spot it. Right? Now, when you start asking about their symptoms and all this kind of stuff, as you do, they will explain that they get out of breath easy, they have headaches, nausea, lightheadedness, fainting. All these kind of things can just basically mean that their breathing is very inefficient. The poor posture, like remember earlier on, we had the two girls picture. The girl on the left, very typical, most likely an overbreather. Don't know her, but I would expect. A lot of the times, if you ask them, especially if they're athletes, when they go running or cycling or whatnot, they will complain their airway is just not clear. So they have all this junk or gunk in the airway, and they can't really clear it. And that's why they're always coughing as well. So they probably don't have coronavirus. They probably don't have anything nasty going on with them at all. But they just have like phlegm, or in the UK they say catarrh or postnasal drip or whatever. That kind of is the symptom, or one of the symptoms. And sometimes, these are the these are the cases that really tug at your heartstrings. They come to you and they say that you're the last chance, last hope. They've been busting themselves, you know, training, and they've done everything they possibly could, and they're not getting anywhere. They're not reaching their potential. And you can adjust them. You can do whatever you do, you know, do all the soft tissue work, talk to their coach, talk about nutrition. But actually, if they're not breathing, they're not going anywhere, like we said earlier. So you've got to spot that as well. Sometimes they gain weight, and really, it's just life and training. It just feels much harder than before. And that means that they're just sighing, you know, constantly, just like that. And that is a very typical overbreather. So, summary, almost made it through. So well done for hanging on in there. So nose is for breathing, mouth is for eating and other stuff. CO2 is not the enemy. So carbon dioxide, even if it has had a very bad rap over the years, it's not the enemy. So there is a lot of good in carbon dioxide. We do need it. Okay. So utilizing nasal breath will reduce respiratory rate, which is very good, very important. Practicing the breath holding on empty lungs can help boost sports performance. Nitric oxide, again, remember from the nasal passages, helps with breathing efficiency and performance. And breathing fully will help you detox and helps you maintain optimal blood pH values. It's very important. So good breath improves health, sports performance, and recovery. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with me so far. You know, I'm sure there's, you guys have lots of questions. We'll figure out a way to address those as and when they arise. But like I said, you know, earlier, none of this stuff that I've covered here is anything new per se. It's all basic physiology, basic neurology, mechanics, all this kind of stuff. And with a hint of practical application thrown in a mix as well. So thank you very much on behalf of FICS, the World Sports Chiropractic Federation. And please check out all the other wonderful webinars, educational materials that are available on the website. There's the ICSC program, of course, the FICS flagship program that, you know, completing that will get you rolling with the whole FICS and get you doing the games, so you can start working on the games with us. And there is no greater joy, nothing more fun than that. So thank you once again, and check out the rest of the stuff.